Kuala Lumpur International Airport, a few minutes past midnight on March 8, 2014. At Gate C1, a Boeing 777 is boarding for the red-eye to Beijing. Registration 9M, MRO, 11 years old. One of two flights Malaysia Airlines sends up this route every day. This is Flight 370, carrying 227 passengers and 12 crew from 14 nations, most of them Chinese citizens heading home. In the cargo hold sit 4,566 kilograms of mangosteen fruit and 221 kilograms of lithium-ion batteries, a manifest nobody would think twice about for months. In the left seat is Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, 53 years old, 33 years with the airline, more than 18,000 flight hours. Beside him sits First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, 27. This is his final training sector before full certification on the 777. Where did Flight 370 go? And who was flying it when it went? 12 years, for navies, and the largest search in aviation history have answered neither question. At 0:41, the 777 lifts off and climbs into a clear night, leveling at 35,000 feet over the South China Sea. At 1:07, the aircraft's data system transmits a routine status burst. Fuel, engines, position, everything reads normal. It is the last such report the aircraft will ever send. At 1:19, Kuala Lumpur Control hands the flight to Vietnam, and a calm voice answers from the cockpit. "Good night, Malaysian 370. Investigators would later conclude the voice was the captain's. Ordinary words, spoken 10,000 times a night over these waters. 2 minutes later, at 1:21, the transponder goes dark. It happens 38 seconds after the aircraft crosses Waypoint IGARI, inside the seam between Malaysian and Vietnamese airspace, the gap where each controller assumes the other is watching. Ho Chi Minh Control waits, then queries. Kuala Lumpur queries back. At one point, the airline's own operations center reports the flight is over Cambodia. Its software is projecting where the plane should be, not where it is. Hours drain away chasing a dot that no longer exists. On every civilian radar screen, Flight 370 has simply ceased to be. But military radar keeps watching, and what it records is not a crash. The blip turns hard back to the southwest, a turn so aggressive some analysts judged it at the edge of what the autopilot would fly. It recrosses the Malay Peninsula, threading the boundary between Malaysian and Thai airspace, where neither side's air defense treats it as its problem. At 1:52, it skirts south of the island of Penang, the captain's birthplace, and as it passes, the first officer's mobile phone briefly registers with a cell tower below. No call, just a phone, alive, 10 kilometers up, saying here. Then the track bends northwest up the Strait of Malacca, one of the busiest shipping lanes on Earth, and at 2:22, some 370 kilometers northwest of Penang, the last radar return fades. No Air Force scrambles a jet. No one on the ground has yet agreed the plane is even missing. Yet the aircraft is not gone. 3 minutes later, at 2:25, a piece of equipment aboard called the Satellite Data Unit sends a log-on request to a communications satellite parked 36,000 kilometers above the Indian Ocean. A log-on request means the unit is starting up, which means sometime in the previous hour it lost power and got it back. Someone or something switched the lights off and on again. From then on, once an hour, the satellite sends the plane a silent electronic question, "Are you still there?" And once an hour, something aboard politely answers. At 2:39, the airline tries the satellite phone to the cockpit. The network accepts the call. It rings into the aircraft. No one picks up. At 7:13, they try again. Again, the aircraft systems answer. Again, no human voice. 7 handshakes in all. The 7th, incomplete, another log-on request, the signature of a system restarting on emergency power as the engines flame out, arrives at 8:19, 7.5 hours after takeoff at the far edge of the aircraft's fuel. For a full week, ships and aircraft combed the South China Sea, the wrong ocean. When engineers in London decoded the satellite handshakes, tiny shifts in signal timing and frequency traced 2 arcs across the globe. one curving north into Asia, one south into open water. The northern arc crossed the radar of a dozen militaries. None had seen a thing. Everything pointed down the southern arc, into a stretch of the Indian Ocean so remote the nearest port lay days away. 26 nations joined the effort. Australia led a sonar survey of 120,000 square kilometers of seabed mountains, ravines, and plains up to 6,000 meters down, mapped in detail for the first time in human history because a passenger jet might be lying on them. Ships stayed on station for 1,046 days before the search was suspended in January 2017. It was the most expensive search in aviation history, and it found ships lost in the 1800s but not the 777. In 2018, a private operator, Ocean Infinity, scanned a further 112,000 square kilometers in a matter of months. No find, no fee. The seabed gave back nothing. No fuselage, no recorders, no answer. On March 24, 2014, Malaysia's Prime Minister had already told the families what the mathematics implied. The flight ended in the southern Indian Ocean. Where did Flight 370 go? And who was flying it when it went? The arcs could say where it ended. They could not say why. Then the ocean began to speak for itself. On July 29, 2015, 508 days after the disappearance, a beach cleaning crew on Réunion Island, led by a man named Johnny Baig, pulled a barnacle-crusted wing section from the surf. It lay nearly 4,000 kilometers from the search zone. It was a flaperon, a moving surface from a 777's wing, and internal part numbers matched the missing aircraft. Over the following 2 years, more than 30 fragments washed up along the coasts of Mozambique, Tanzania, Madagascar, and South Africa. One of them a panel-stenciled NO step, found by an American lawyer who had taken up beachcombing for the missing plane as a private mission. The locations were exactly where Indian Ocean currents would deliver debris from the southern arc. Drift modeling run backward pointed home to the same water the arcs did. And the fragments carried one more clue. Australian engineers studied a recovered flap and concluded it was likely retracted, stowed for cruise, not extended for landing, when it broke. Combined with that final half handshake, whose frequency shifts suggest a descent accelerating past 15,000 feet per minute, the picture at the end is of an aircraft falling out of the sky with no one flying it. But the fragments confirmed only how the flight died, not how it lived through those 6 silent hours. The tunback itself is the stubborn detail. The aircraft threaded airspace boundaries and radar seams, the Malaysia-Vietnam handover gap, the Malaysia-Thailand border, the exit past the last military radar, with what investigators described as precision. Malaysia's own report concluded the turn was flown manually, not by autopilot. That kind of routing suggests a hand that knew where the watchers stopped watching. In the captain's home, police found a personal flight simulator, and forensic examiners recovered from it a deleted practice route. Up the Strait of Malacca, then south, ending in fuel exhaustion deep in the southern Indian Ocean, created weeks before the flight. On the other hand, the simulator held thousands of stored points from years of use. The captain left no note, no claim, no manifesto. His finances were unremarkable. The people who knew him described a steady, well-liked professional who built model planes and posted home repair videos. The first officer was days from his wedding certification into the fleet, his phone reaching for a tower as his aircraft fled the coast. No hijacker ever claimed the aircraft. 13 years of silence from every group on Earth that has never once been shy. Investigators weighed the cargo, too. You may recall the 221 kilograms of lithium batteries in the hold, loaded in Kuala Lumpur without X-ray screening, and a battery fire would explain a silent crew. But a burning aircraft does not navigate cleanly for 6 more hours. A sudden decompression would explain the silence too. A crew unconscious in minutes, a ghost plane flying on. Yet an unconscious crew does not handfly a curving track around a nation's radar, and a dying airplane does not switch its satellite unit off and then on again. Was anyone at the controls at 8:19? Was the cabin dark the whole way south? Did 238 people sleep through the turn that erased them? Every theory answers 1 hour of that night and fails the other 6. In July 2018, after 495 pages, the official investigation conceded it was unable to determine the real cause. adding only that the controls were likely manipulated deliberately. By whom, it could not say. The families of the 239 mark each March 8th with candles and empty chairs. In 2025, they finally got what they had asked for. Malaysia signed a new no-find, no-fee agreement with Ocean Infinity, $70 million, payable only on discovery, and robot submarines returned to a fresh 15,000 square kilometer zone along the 7th Arc, 1,900 kilometers off the coast of Perth. They searched in March 2025 until the southern winter drove them off, came back on the last day of the year, and scanned through January 23, 2026. On March 8, 2026, the 12th anniversary, almost to the hour, the announcement came: nothing. Since 2018, the company has now mapped more than 140,000 square kilometers of that seabed, an area larger than England, and its chief executive admitted the scale of the challenge is almost impossible to comprehend. The family's answer was immediate: extend the contract. The government pays nothing unless the plane is found. There is no reason ever to stop looking. Pieces of the aircraft sit in laboratories on 3 continents. The rest lies somewhere along a curve of cold water longer than a country. I keep returning to those 7 satellite handshakes. A machine calmly answering that it was still there, hour after hour, while no human voice said a word. And to the 2 phone calls that rang and rang into a cabin no one can picture. Where did Flight 370 go? And who was flying it when it went? Somewhere south of the 7th Arc, in water deeper than daylight reaches, a Boeing 777 holds the only complete account of that night. 12 years of robots have crossed the dark above it. So far, it has kept the story to itself.